In this video, we will learn how to change the length of a UI image at runtime. There are 4 ways to change the image length. This video has a lot of content, so it will take a long time to play. After watching the setup process, please select the part you want to watch. First, let's simply implement the HP increase-decrease function. Let's create a new script. I will create a new game object and apply the script to it. Since we'll be using buttons, I'll be using the Unity Engine.UI directive. Let's create 2 button variables for increasing and decreasing HP. Next, we'll create a function for the buttons. We will use a bool parameter to apply a condition in a function. Now let's create codes to connect each button to the HP update function using the onClick and add listener functions. Let's assign each button to a variable. For testing, we will create integer variables for the maximum HP, the test value that will be used for increase and decrease, and the current HP. Current HP will be initialized to be equal to maximum HP. Now let's create a function that increases or decreases HP depending on conditions. If the condition is true, we will add the test value to the current HP. If the condition is false, we will subtract the text value from the current HP. Let's check that the buttons and functions work together well. It is confirmed that each button works properly according to its function. However, there is a problem. Current HP is increasing beyond the maximum limit. We need to add one more condition. If the current HP is higher than the maximum HP, it will not increase the current HP. And if the current HP is 0 or lower, it will not decrease the current HP. Finally, we will apply the clamp function to ensure that when increasing or decreasing HP, it does not go beyond the maximum and minimum ranges. Great, I think the basic setup is done. Now let's write some codes to make the length of the HP bar change in the real time. Let's create a new script. I will name this script Manager HP bar update. Next, we'll apply this script to the parent of the HP bar image. Let's create a variable to store the HP bar image. I will create a public function so that it can be accessed and executed from the Manager HP test button script. Since we will be changing the length of the image based on the current HP and max HP, we will use parameters in the public function we just created. Since we need to access the Manager HP bar update class, we will create a variable for that class. Let's drag and drop the game object onto the variable. Let's change the length of the HP bar by changing the fill amount value in the image. Now let's write the code that calls the function. I will copy and paste the same code into the HP reduction code block. Now we need to think about handling different ranges. The maximum HP is 100, but the maximum fill amount is 1, so range conversion is required. Let's create a remapping formula required for range transformation. A total of 5 parameters are required. Value is the current HP, in 1 and in 2 are the minimum and maximum HP ranges before the change. Out 1 and out 2 are the minimum and maximum HP ranges to be changed. For more information about remap, please click the button in the upper right corner. This code is a remap formula. With this formula you can convert any range into any range you want. We will enter the current HP, minimum HP, maximum HP, and the range values 0 and 1 for fill amount. Sorry, I used the result value as a parameter variable, so I will create a new variable and then modify it. Now let's check if the change to fill amount is working properly. Okay, you can see that the fill amount value changes as the HP decreases and increases. Now let's change the length of the HP bar by changing the scale X of the rect transform. The range of scale X values can also be applied between 0 and 1, just like fill amount. We will access the local scale variable of the rect transform and change its value. We must use a vector3 variable, and since the y and z values will not change, we will set both to 1. You can see that the scale X value has been changed correctly. Now let's change the length of the HP bar by changing the width of the rect transform. If you change the width, you can see the child images of the HP bar move as well. Since we are using the length of the image, we need a separate variable. I created a variable to store the length of the image. In the start function, we need to store the width of the image in a variable. Let's check if the variables are stored properly. You can see that the width value of the HP bar image is stored in the variable. Now we need to transform the range using the remap function. The maximum value of the final converted range will be the HP length default variable created earlier. Changing the size delta value of an image requires a vector2 variable. The size delta value input requires the width and height values of the image. Let's add a variable to store the height value of the image. You can see that the width value of the image changes without any problems. Now let's change the anchor preset of the image to horizontal center stretch. This way, when you resize the parent, the child will also resize. When you change an image to stretch, the concept of image size changes. To be precise, this is because the position of each anchor in the image changes and is stretched according to the size of the parent image. Accordingly, the length and height of the image to be referenced and initialized must be measured in a different way. Let's see how to reference each item in the rect transform that has been changed to stretch. Simply, you can access the offset min and max variables of the rect transform. The x value of offset max corresponds to the right value, and the left value corresponds to the x of offset min. Bottom of the image corresponds to y of offset min. Then, the top of the image should refer to the y of the offset max. Debugging verifies that the values are stored correctly. However, the height value and stretch top value in the inspector are different. Since the height is stretched by dividing it into the bottom and top, it is expressed as 12.5, which is 25 divided by 2. What we need are the right and top value of the image. Let's apply the default value as the x value of offset max. The height value of the image will be applied to the y value of offset max. There are some things to check before applying the remap function. In stretch state, the default length of the image is 0 from the right side. When the HP bar is completely reduced, it becomes the same size as the width of the parent image. So let's add a variable to get the parent's width value. I will save the parent's image component to a temporary variable and then save the width value. In the remap function, the minimum value of the range to be changed becomes the parent's width value. Then the maximum value is 0, or the right value of the HP image. The y value of the vector2 variable will be applied with the height value of the image saved previously. We can see that the right value of the image is applied as a negative number. Let's modify it by applying a negative number to the variable applied to x of vector 2. We can see the HP bar decreasing and increasing correctly.